One Piece, one of the best manga there is, and even the best-selling manga in the world. There are many reasons why it has this status. One Piece is known for their diverse characters, their tragic backstories, and for having the best world building in all of any manga history. But there is one more thing left. Its power system. Devil fruits, haki, and the many other martial arts are in the story. But what is the best fruit? Which one of them, magical fruits, is the best? And that is what we are going to find out today. I will rank the top 20 fruits and put them all in 5 different categories. And these are strength, how much power the fruit can toss out, defense, innate ability or techniques that the fruit provides the users to take less or even no damage, and utility, in how many different ways they can use their powers, and last but not least, the potential. What the maximum capabilities of these devil fruits are. I also added drawbacks because some of the fruits come with innate drawbacks. Each of the categories gives up to 20 points, bringing the total of the maximum points to 100. So let's start with the video. But before we go to the top 20, there are some honorable mentions. There are arguments for all of them to be in the top 20, but unfortunately they didn't make it. And these fruits are Boa Hancock's Mero Mero no Mi, Crocodile Tsuno Tsuno no Mi, and one of the newer fruits that we were introduced to is Yamato's Devil Fruit. To speed through all of them, the Mero Mero no Mi has really good offense but lacks in a defense department. Defense wise, it doesn't really offer that much. And what does Boa have for potential and utility? Not that much if you think about it. And there is an added drawback to it, that the users must be pretty or some kind of way attractive for the opponents to feel some kind of way to use their power at the full potential. For the sand fruit, it just has too big of a drawback for me. Liquids are everywhere and there's too many countermeasures for me. And for Yamato's fruit, it doesn't really have a real drawback, but the stats all in all weren't enough for me to put it higher. But if you think otherwise, you can write it down who should have made it into the list and who even shouldn't make it up here. But finally, let's start with our list. On the 20th place is the Hobi Hobi no Mi. This is one of the weirdest fruits in all of One Piece. Her main ability is that if she touches someone, she can turn them into a toy. And there is a weird side effect to this fruit. Everyone that is turned into a toy, everyone else on the world forgets them. They think that they never existed. So in reality, these fruits can affect the entire world. But it's quite weird for me. So she has a one-shot ability, and who would think that a little girl like her would have such power? So I gave her a 20 at power, but for defense her ability doesn't offer much, if anything. With her full potential she can create an army of toys that do whatever that she wants, so I put her potential high. Her utility is one of her strong points. Having an infinite amount of little buttloads that everything that you want is really strong. This fruit sounds really strong, but she has a really big drawback. All of her turns get turned back if she's scared or damaged. If you remember, I just said that she's a child. But a lie. In reality she's 22 years old. But why does she look so young? The reason is that there is an added quirk to this fruit. If you consume the quirk at like 14, you will stay 14 your entire life. So it isn't really a drawback, but not positive. Like in her case, in Sugar's case, it's a drawback because she's a child forever now. But if like she had it in her 20s or 30s, it would be a really good benefit because she will stay at her prime forever. But this always depends on the user. So all in all, I'm giving her 80 out of 100 points. At 19, we have one of the fan favorite fruits. It's the Mera Mera no Mi. Even though it is one of the rare fruits that had 2 non-users, we still didn't see its full potential. In the end of the story, the fruit will be most likely put higher than it is right now. Shooting out giant fireballs and having the power to incinerate their enemies will put this fruit high on the strength ranking. But until we see Sabo using blue flames against Akainu, I can't give him much higher ranking. For defense he doesn't have much, it's just an added speed boost and he can fly now. And as for potential, it is on the higher end. But more than blue flames there is not much that I could think of. As for utility, he could amplify his speed with his flames and control and will fire at his will. For drawbacks there are like 3 main ones: water, ice abilities and gas abilities. I added gas abilities because if you take oxygen from the fire will extinguish. I'm letting that in. There are not many people with this counter, so I will put him at an 83 out of 100. At 18 we have the Gaseous Fruit, one of the few counters to the Meta Metronomy. As for strength, Cheesy can literally take your oxygen out of you, and that is kinda broken. This is not the one-shot ability, but it kinda is. As for defense, he's not much different than Sabo, so I'm giving him the same points. But the potential of this fruit is crazy. I'm not a scientist, but there are many different gases that would kill you, but just taking out oxygen. He can take the oxygen and you can't breathe, but he can also increase the oxygen in the air, and that also is bad for you. As I said, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but if the oxygen is too high, you will struggle to breathe. And there are way more things that he can do. His drawback is that most of the gases are highly flammable, and there are many heat-based abilities in One Piece, putting his end score at 83 out of 100. 17. The placement of the other two fruits might be controversial, but not as much as this one. It's a darkness fruit. With this fruit, Blackbeard can make dark holes that sucks everything around the inside of it, punch you with black holes and make giant areas of darkness. Until now, it isn't worth giving it 20 points, but I'm sure that this fruit will show his true strength nearing the end of the story. And as for defense, he has a 1 of 2 rust. He gets twice the damage with this fruit, but instead of taking all of his defense away, I will take some points out of the drawbacks. Because as for defense, he still can surround himself in darkness, suck you in and do other stuff. But one of his extra abilities is that if he touches you, you can't use your devil fruit anymore. He negates other people's devil fruits, making him an instant advantage against all his opponents. As of right now, Blackbeard is the only one who has more than one devil fruit. It is still unknown if he can do that because of his devil fruit or because of other factors. And as I said, he loses many points due to his drawbacks, putting his end score at 84 out of 100. Next one is Enel's Lightning Fruit. With this fruit you can transform himself into a literal lightning god and throw lightning around at your will at your enemies, putting his strength very high. As for defense, it doesn't offer really anything for pure defense, but the speed he gets gives it some points back. Because he can dodge attacks at the speed of lightning and don't get hit at all. Sounds quite good for defense, doesn't it? As for potential and utility, he can use his electricity powering different machines, for example his Maxim or the Hontaras that are on the Immune. The only real drawback to this fruit is that if he uses his ability to his fullest, he will damage everyone, also his allies and innocent people. For Enel, that isn't much of a drawback, but for me, and hope for you, that is a quite big of a drawback. Putting his final score at an 85 out of 100. At 15, sharing the same points, is the Hito no Mi model Daibutsu. With this fruit, Sengoku can transform himself into a giant Buddha. As a Zoan, he gets increased stats. He has stronger attacks, defense and also gets higher regeneration. He also gets most likely some kind of enlightenment as a Buddha. His main ability is punching you as a giant Buddha with shockwaves. And an added bonus is that he shines brightly, getting him an advantage in fight. As a Buddha, I put his potential really high, but we didn't see everything from this fruit, and unfortunately I'm sure that we won't see everything from this fruit, because the Yuru Sengoku, is just too old to use his fruits at his fullest. As for utility, he gets extra abilities but nothing to put him at the top. At 14 we get to one of my favorite fruits. It's the Doku Doku no Mi, also known as the poison fruit. This fruit is so underrated. Magellan took the entire Blackbeard's Pirates time skip on with just one ability. If Shiri wasn't there, there wouldn't be Blackbeard's Pirates right now in the story. Just showing me the power that he got. He can transform himself into a giant poison monster that is ushering out poison. Dodging his abilities is hard enough, but even if you punch him, you still get poisoned, so he has one of the best defenses in the story. His potential is at the higher end, but for utility, he just doesn't offer that much. In the same vein as the lightning fruit, His abilities can hurt his allies and innocent people by using his abilities. I'm not sure if it is confirmed, but he loves eating poison, and due to that, he needs to go to the toilet like every 30 minutes. But is it because he ate this fruit, or because of some other weird reason? I'm not sure, but I'm still going to take some points, giving him an end score of 86 out of 100. This and the Devil Fruit before are interchangeable for me, because in the end, they do the same thing. It's a magma fruit. Both of them create substances that can do a lot of damage, and both of them can coat themselves with that substance to make it harder to hit them. In the end, they're nearly the same, but the magma fruit has one advantage. He can propel himself with his magma, making him faster, but I would also give the poison fruit an advantage in potential. At number 12 we have a fruit that would be broken in the real world, but it is still really strong in the One Piece world, and it is the magnet fruit from Kid. He can control all of the magnetic metals near him. He can not just add some random scrap to his body, but he can even create gigantic robots and use the metal to protect himself. His attacks can injure tanks like Big Mom, but even Shanks acted quickly after he charged his laser against his crew. You shouldn't also don't neglect the defensive abilities of this fruit. He can coat himself in iron and make the iron take the damage for him. As for potential, he would have a way higher potential in the real world, but it's still high in One Piece, because nearly everything has some kind of iron or metal in it. For utility, he can create whatever he wants out of his constructs. As for an added bonus, he can disarm people that uses swords or rifles easy. One of the interactions that I really want to see is Kid against the pacifisters or even the Seraphins. Could he just throw them around or even play with their magnetic waves and turn them off? His only real drawback is that there is not always a bunch of metal around, giving him a final score out of 87 out of 100. At number 11 we have the Devil Fruit of one of my favorite characters in the story. It's the Gravity Fruit from Fujitora. He never had a real serious fight as of right now, but this fruit is still very strong. He can level that entire series and he can summon meteors and let them crash onto you. Throwing meteors sounds cool, but I would have used the fruit in a different way. Just imagine Fujitora fighting with a sword, and while slashing down using his fruit, he brings his sword down with the same power that he did with the meteor. And that's the reason why he gets a straight 20 for strength. I'm sure that will never happen, but just imagine cloaking himself in gravity and using a similar ability like Gojo's Infinity. Because it's too much headcanon, I won't give him all of the points. As you can see, the potential of this fruit is really high, but it lacks in utility, and throw meters around will cause collateral damage, putting a final score at 88. Now we move on to the top 10, starting it off with the Light Fruit. Did you ever get hit in the speed of light? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that light speed in One Piece is lower than in the real world, because I looked it up how much damage a light speed punch would do, and it's a lot. It's roughly estimated to be about 3 times the destructive power of the entire world's nuclear arsenal if it would be released at the same time. With his speed, just the top of the world can dream about hitting him. So it's really unlikely that someone hits him, but if someone manages to hit him, this fruit doesn't grant him another way of defense. The fruit doesn't bring much on the table in form of utility, but it shines in its drawbacks, because its only drawback would be gravity, and maybe the darkness fruit. And I'm just realizing the pun wasn't intended. But in the end I will give the lightning fruit an 88.5 out of 100. Now we go to number 9, and this user of the Devil Fruit has the saddest backstory in all of One Piece. Anime only watchers need to wait for his backstory to be shown, but trust me, it is number 1. And the Devil Fruit I'm talking about is the Paw Fruit. His paws allow him to negate damage and even make air pressure attacks, giving him a high defensive and offensive ability. But there is more. He can repel aspects out of his body, like pain, and transfer it to someone else. But he can also transfer other things. For anime only watchers, this is a spoiler warning. He can also transfer his memories into a bubble where other people can see his memories. He can also send people flying to different locations by touching them. The only real drawback of this fruit is that He now has paws on his hands and he grew little cute bears, putting his final score at 89 out of 100. Let's go on to number 8. If I remember correctly, this is the first mythical zone that we saw in the anime. It's the mythical Phoenix Fruit. As we know, having a zone gives you an all-around boost to all of your stats, but especially your regeneration. But with this fruit, Mako brings that aspect to a whole nother level. This Devil Fruit gives Mako the ability to transform himself into a phoenix and fly around the battlefield. But it's not the only thing that it provides. The phoenix's blue flames regenerate all the damage that Mako takes. At the end, he has instant healing. It is really hard to defeat Mako in this form, but it shouldn't be neglected that he still feels the pain, but he just regenerates instantly. But the healing doesn't just apply to himself. He can heal his allies while fighting, making him a great asset in bigger battles. The only negative about this fruit is the strength. It doesn't grant you much in terms of power, but makes it up in healing and supporting. All in all, he has a great fruit, putting his total right under 90. And as it should be, at place 7, right above his son, is Whitebeard with his fruit. The Quake fruit, one of the most offensive fruit out there. Sengoku even stated that he could destroy the whole world with this fruit, showing again the outrageous power that this fruit provides the user. He can change the entire battlefield how he likes, dragging entire chunks of earth down, creating tsunamis with this fruit, destroying the earth beneath you, and more things are achievable with this fruit. In Marineford, Whitebeard showed us what he can do with his fruit, but I'm sure if he was in his prime, we would have seen the real power that this fruit has. But the two things holding him back are the defensive capabilities and his drawbacks. There is not much of defense in this fruit, if any, and the other is holding this immense power, surrounds the body of the user, and it also does collateral damage. Even though we still didn't see the full potential of this fruit still broke the 90s barrier, with exactly 90 points. And the 6th place belongs to the Hie no Mi used by Kuzan. Freezing oceans, freezing people to death with one touch, or making weapons out of hardened ice. This and way more is capable with this fruit. He can even coat himself in ice layers to reduce the damage that he takes. The potential of this fruit is very high. If Kuzan has the ability to freeze someone to absolute zero, he would be able to one-shot everybody. It's a rule that all the Devil Fruit users are weak against water, but Kuzan has kind of a way out of it. He can just freeze the water, negating the negative effect it would have to him. The only disadvantage from putting this fruit higher is the disadvantage to heat, and there are many heat or fire based abilities in One Piece, but the Hie no Mi is still one of the strongest and gets a 90.5 out of 100. At our top 5 spot, we got Kaido's fruit, the Ua no Mi. The manga and finally the anime showed us how strong this fruit is and how many different abilities this fruit has. There is a reason why you should always bet on Kaido in a 1v1. From generating clouds to fly to spitting fire that can destroy entire mountains, he can also surround himself in a fighter avatar and attack with that. Not to mention the added stats as a zone that he gets. And he also gets his dragon scales that is nearly impossible to cut through. All in all, the defensive and offensive capabilities of this fruit are just maxed out. And as for utility, it is cool to fly around as a gigantic dragon and do whatever you want because no one can stop you. But it doesn't bring much to the table in a day-to-day use. The only real disadvantage of this fruit is that he is gigantic. It might be good to be gigantic, but he also is a bigger target now. But if we stick with the name of this devil fruit, before his awakening it was most likely just a normal koi fish. It was never mentioned that he was awakened or that he was a fish before. But at the end, it's just my headcanon. But even with all of that, he still got 91 points out of 100. Here we go with number 4. At 4th place I put the fruit of the Navy's newest admiral, Green Bull, with his Logia the Woodwood fruit. He can create entire forests just by walking there. He can even merge himself with the forest and suck the energy out of his enemies. He can become a gigantic forest monster just like that. And his Logia gives him an added benefit. He doesn't need any food, because he's a plant, he just can do photosynthesis. And if doesn't eating sound strong, it's going to be worse. He can't really die. He can plant seeds on the ground, and if something happens to him, he just can regrow himself out of the seeds. At the end, he is an immortal mortal. He can die, but he can't. So that's why I put his defense at a 20. But he can't compare that much with the offensive abilities than the others on the list, but the potential and the utility of this fruit are really high. It just has a minor flaw, and that is the weakness against fire. But Green Bull said that he has countermeasures against his weakness. All in all, a really strong fruit with nearly no weaknesses. And the third place on this ranking belongs to the biggest of mobs, Big Mom. Soul manipulation is one of the strongest abilities. She can take part of people's soul and put them into inanimate objects and give them life. She had an entire country filled with living objects, but she can also put her own soul into objects and make homies. These are stronger than the rest. Her three strongest homies are a living cloud living sword and even a miniature sun. She can combine all of her homies and do a gigantic attack, but if you think about it, she could even have stronger attacks. What is holding her back from making like an extra tornado homie or even a water homie? And I don't think that I need to explain why a water homie would be really strong. But this isn't even all of it. If she's injured, she can exchange her soul to heal herself, giving her nearly instant healing. Using her ability to the fullest, she would have an infinite amount of abilities. But as we know, Big Mom isn't the brightest. Her only real drawback is that she needs to use her own soul to make strong homies, but the trade-off is more than worth it. She stands at the high 92 points. Now we go on to our top 2. Around 2 years ago, this would have been my number 1 pick. This fruit on its own has the same value as Whitebeard's bounty. The OP Nami from Law has a worth of 5 billion berries. And for a good reason. Because if you master this fruit, you can nearly do whatever you want. This fruit grants him the ability to switch around objects or even switch an object with himself to dodge incoming attacks. And on Punk Hazard we even saw him use an ability that switches the personalities of the Straw Hats. He even has the ability to cut your heart out of your chest and still make you live, even though your heart is in his hands pumping. Or even having a sword that has a sure hit bypassing any kind of defense. Or even making rooms that have specific restrictions. For example, in the fight against Big Mom, he made a room where she can't talk and call her homies. The capabilities of these fruits are nearly endless. It was also mentioned that this fruit can give someone immortality, but at the cost of the user's life. The only drawback is that if he uses too much of his godly power, he reduces his lifespan. But with his 93 points, he still isn't our number 1. But before we go on to the strongest fruit, I need to mention something. There are these other fruits that might be on par or even stronger than our number 1 pick. For anime only watchers, this part will include huge spoilers, so if you want, skip this part. These fruits, or if you can even call them fruits, are the Goroseis and Imusamu's ability to transform into these demon-like creatures. After transforming, the Gorosei Saturn made Sanji unable to move just by looking at him. Sanji, the guy who toyed around with Kaido's number 2. But for now I'm still not adding them to the list because it's still unsure if these are Dev Fruit abilities or some other special magical abilities. So here comes our number 1. Who could beat these demon-like creatures? Who is going to be the shining light at the end of the story? It's going to be the sun god Nika, Luffy's fruit. After awakening his fruit, Luffy got Toon Force. Yeah, the thing characters like Tom and Jerry have. Describing his ability is really hard, but in the end he can do everything with anything. From making himself into a giant, grabbing lightning around himself, or just washing off the damage he took like nothing. The only limitation he has is his imagination. I would give this fruit all of the points, because he can do whatever he wants. But he still has some drawbacks. After using his ability for too long, he gets really dried out and unable to move or do really anything. But still, this is the strongest devil fruit for me, putting him at a whooping 96 out of 100. That was a really long video, I hope you enjoyed it. I know, the quality of this video and the pronunciation still isn't where I want it to be, but I will try to improve myself going forward to give you all the best quality content there is. But how does your top 20 look like? Or what would you change in this order? And what did I get wrong? Please write them down in the comments, and thanks for watching.